to Turnkey on Queen City News Plus, your go-to show for everything real estate in the Carolinas. We dive into the latest market trends, the do's and don'ts of the industry with expert advice on navigating this dynamic landscape that we call home. I am your host, Morgan Francis, and today we're going to talk about the different ways that you can buy a property. And to do that, we're going to bring in Mike Heggie. He's a realtor in Charlotte. And Mike, before we get into that, I just want to play a video because you're known also as that guy on TikTok. Let's take a listen.
That's the infamous hair swoop. I feel like I should do it now in honor of that video.
Yeah. So tell me about this. We've done a story about that on Queen City News. Just you're breathing in a video to market a property. What all happened there?
We were doing a normal walkthrough video, and our Gen Z editor was playing a spoof on me and ultimately decided to take out all of the versions of me talking and have the outtakes, which is normally not the forward-facing type of video. So I think it gained a lot of traction. We've had a lot of fun. We've done some spoof and some spinoffs from there, but ultimately just out here breathing is our catchphrase.
Well, and you try to do a lot with your social media. It's hard to make a splash in an industry where there are so many agents, so many options that you can choose from. You're really known for your social media presence.
I'm grateful that a lot of people follow and certainly hear our story and our different journey. But for 20 years in real estate, you're trying to separate yourself from the rest. And this is one way we found is a unique way that shows my personality, but also shows the depth that we can provide. Have a little fun along the way.
That's the goal, right? At the end, this is supposed to be something that's fun. All right, so I introed this show talking about the different ways that you can purchase a property. What would be those ways?
It's a great question. So there's a lot of different ways you could purchase a property. As a realtor, I'm known most often as a retail home buy representation. So in other words, we help people through start to finish, from identifying properties that are on or off market. Mm-hmm. And we go under contract with that property, keep it on track, and ultimately close and celebrate at the end. So there's a variety of different ways that we could accomplish that.
So what does that all look like?
Great question. So we have the retail sale, which is listed on our multiple listing service. This is where all realtors go to input this data, and it syndicates with portals that you're familiar with, like homes.com, realtor.com, Zillow, to name a few. Consumers find that either from our portal to them or on their own. We identify those properties, and those are considered on-market type of properties. At Compass, we have a private exclusive portal where we start listing for a variety of reasons, sometimes due to privacy concerns. Sometimes we want to test the market there. Sometimes the home is not quite ready to go to market. They're painting or preparing in that process. So we start there to kind of test and see, and then we go launch to market more often than not as per a seller's directive. So purchasing a property, you kind of start looking internally within the portals, and then there are some off-market or on-market properties which seem to be always in topic of conversation. For example, new construction. That's a great one.
So what does the process of purchasing new construction, how does that differ from, for instance, I'm looking for a home, I'm saying to my realtor, hey, I like this one, and this one, and they schedule the showings, we go and look, and then we place an offer, right? And we wait to hear from the seller. And maybe they've got 5 offers. Maybe they don't have any, right? It's that waiting game. How does that differ from new construction?
That's a great question. New construction, often they don't promote all of the properties at once, because if they were to say, we've got 100 units in this neighborhood, for example, new construction, they wouldn't list all 100. They list them in phases, and normally they list them when they're much closer to completion. So it depends on what phase of the community that the developer or the builder's in. So most national home builders will start with listing a few, but they don't list them all because they're not quite ready to be built and move in ready. So the closer they are to the certificate of occupancy or the deliverable, the home delivery process, that's when the builder would say, hey, we're going to list a little bit more in phases as it becomes available.
What about the competition? What does that look like compared to, we could use 2020 as an example where people were getting outbid by 20, 30, 40, whatever, $1,000 on top of the list price. And especially for a first-time home buyer, you just can't compete with that. Is that the same situation for new builds, or is that a different situation?
It's a good question. It depends on which builder. Most builders in the beginning phase of a neighborhood, they're wanting to enhance, incentivize the market. And so they're offering what they call in the industry back pocket incentives. So things like, We'll pay for all your closing costs. We'll buy down your interest rate. We'll offer you fridge, washer and dryer, and blinds. We may even throw in a fence. So things like that you don't think of necessarily that are add-on costs, because the builder basic may come with obviously the shell, but things like showroom credits is a great example. That's where the buyer has selected the elevation, the lot premium, and they've kind of identified all the things that go inside the house, except for the upgrades, because they have a base level and they have the opportunity to upgrade from there. So when you have a true customization of a home and a product, that's when you want to make sure that you really have a full understanding of what the overall cost is. And that's where the builders incentivize the market by offering some of those back pocket incentives.
And what would be a prime example of an upgrade that, something that would be a little more, I guess, generic, for lack of better terminology, versus something that's a little more personalized?
So keep in mind, when you walk in the model home, everything is beautiful and gorgeous.
That's the best of everything.
That's the best of everything.
Because they're trying to sell you on it, right?
Yes. So just keep in mind that everything there is probably an upgrade. Mm-hmm. So a great example is when you walk into a home and you have this entrance, this grand entrance called a foyer or foyer. Mm-hmm. That often is the case, the only place where actual hardwoods exist. And sometimes the builders will have it carpeted everywhere else. Mm-hmm. It makes no logical sense, but if you think about it from a cost perspective, you don't have to have hardwood floors throughout the main level. Mm-hmm. But as more people would probably wager to say they'd prefer it. Right. So that's one of the more common upgrades where you see people go from, definitely don't want carpet in my dining room. Does that make any sense? Unless you're in the 1970s house, which no shade on.
Shag carpet.
And no shade on any older houses here. We've renovated a lot and we love them too. Grew up in an old house as well. But from that standpoint, that's a more common upgrade where you have the upgraded flooring. And then, so you end up saying someone that says, I want hardwoods throughout the entire property, the entire first and second floor. It's going to cost more. That's probably one of the more common ones. Also, countertops, you have level 1. That's the industry term where you have a base level, and you can go all the way to level 5. So level 5 is obviously the most expensive, but that's a customized choice. So if they're giving you showroom credits, as an example, $10,000 for the showroom credit, then that means you can spend that money however you want above the baseline. So if the baseline product is X, you could spend that, but you could gobble that $10K like that. And that's the idea behind the builder. Once they get you in and you see this beautiful kitchen,
they want you to upgrade.
They want you to upgrade. Yeah.
I'm going a little off topic here, as I'm allowed to do, right?
Absolutely.
What would be some of the upgrades that maybe you would advise your clients to hold off on and do themselves, or would you? Because as you mentioned, some of those prices are kind of baked into the sale of the home if it's from a developer, a new build. And is there something that's maybe more affordable that someone could say, no, I'm going to take the basic on this one, and then I can do that down the line on my own?
Fixtures are a great example. It's the jewelry of the house. When you walk in, it's the first impression, but often as the builder basic, it's not that eye-catching. Mm-hmm. So when you take the basic, and then down the road, you could upgrade as a great example. Also, countertops. It's easy to upgrade countertops. Sometimes it's more cost-effective to take the basic and then upgrade down the road. Electrical is one of those that you really can't do down the road. You really wouldn't want to cut into the walls and add extra outlets. You could do it, but probably more advantageous to do it with the builder up front. So you'd run this kind of cost, risk benefit of waiting down the road on each item. Mm-hmm. And the more common ones tend to be things that are cosmetic in nature, like a patio extra living. But you wouldn't necessarily want to add on the structure of the house for like a covered porch, for example. But if you preferred a screen porch, you might say, well, it's only $2,000 more to add it on now versus I could accomplish it in the future, and it's going to be that much more. So you kind of run that analysis on each item.
As you're talking, I'm kind of imagining everything you're mentioning that would cost a lot of money would require someone with a license. And everything that you're saying you could probably do yourself and save a little bit of money is something that maybe you could do yourself or do with the help of someone else who's qualified. But plumbing costs to move plumbing, that costs a lot. An electrician, if you wanted to do something different in the walls, that you're paying for that license essentially, right?
Totally. And a lot of ones like you definitely are. So when we talk about doing it yourself, generally that means that you want to hire a trade and professional, someone that's professional in their craft, is licensed, bonded, and insured. Another common one is the EV charger. We're seeing an uptick where builders are either including it or people are adding it on as an elective choice because it's not that much more during like the process of building to add on that 240 or 220. So depending on the amperage. So you want to make sure that you kind of get the EV charger as a part of that. We're seeing that more often than not.
Are you noticing at all any difference in the appraisals with an EV charger, and what amount does an EV charger add on to a home?
Yeah, it's typically like anywhere from is probably the actual amp itself, not the end product like a Tesla charger
Right.
or the Rivian charger. So you want to think about just having
Connection.
the connection port,
Okay.
and then it goes in there, which is just a plug-in in effect. But the electricians still do it when they come out to install, but they need the actual, instead of adding an extra breaker in the box, they take care of all that. So they kind of get you part A, and then part B, you have the electrician come back with that specific plug-in. It doesn't necessarily raise of an appraisal standpoint, it's more about the desirability down the road. That's where we're kind of heading with a lot of EVs. Right. So having that available, you may not need it, but it's one of those things we're adding on the cost today, maybe help you down the road from terms of desirability.
Okay. So in other words, if you've got, 20 people looking at a home, maybe there are 5 who were on the fence about putting in an offer and they see that EV charger and they think, okay, that puts me over the edge, right?
Totally. And it's just a small thing, or if you keep the house for an Airbnb in the future. Mm-hmm. And, I know plenty of guests that stay on our Airbnbs, they log in, they see an EV, they're like, that's when I'm staying. As simple as that is, really? It's just the convenience of it.
All right, circling back on topic, we're talking about the different ways to buy. I have on my list foreclosure / short sale. They're kind of the same or similar, right?
They're similar, yeah. Yep.
How would someone go about purchasing that, and what would be the like a word of caution that you would give people?
So many words of caution. I've been in real estate 20 years, so I remember when the market was red hot in 2005, and then ultimately slowed down in 2008. And a big core center part of our business was bank-owned properties. And so we called those foreclosed properties, but really the foreclosure is a judicial proceeding in which someone is behind or defaulted on their mortgage. And the only opportunity to clear that debt is to go through this process at the court. And so it is a process.
Which I've actually gone and watched it.
Oh, so interesting, right?
It's like on the first floor of the courthouse, in the corner. It's not even in a room.
Right.
And they stand there and they announce what property that they're going to auction off. And if you're interested in foreclosures, you got to watch that process, because it is something that's just very interesting. There are people there who go there every day to do this.
Every day.
That's their job, is
true.
to buy foreclosures.
Yep.
And then the unfortunate side of it is you see people at last minute trying to salvage their home. So how difficult is the process of purchasing a foreclosure? Because it's not like you're, filling out an offer form, or are you?
It's a great question. So if the foreclosure date, that's really a critical piece in the process, the timeline. The timeline starts where the notice of default is a public official, statement. And at that point, everyone knows that a foreclosure date is pending. Now, what people don't know is if you're the homeowner, and switching gears just for a moment, the homeowner can go down and make their pitch and say, I'm planning on getting my home on the market. I have a windfall coming from an accident that I'm getting a claim on. I need an extension for whatever the reason is. And often is a case, the court system locally will grant it. And so even though there's a lis pendens of that date, that foreclosure date, often as a case, they'll extend it if the person shows up in person. Now, if they've washed their hands of it, they're done with the property, and they say, I want out, unfortunately, they're going to move forward to that process because the bank has no other option. There's no defendant on the other side, so to speak. So when you have the foreclosure date, that's when everything kind of starts. And prior to that date, even if there's not a foreclosure date, if someone is potentially selling for less than what they have in it, so for example, if they purchased in the past few years, they have a large amount of equity, and in that particular submarket, which is not common in Charlotte, to be clear, typically the Charlotte has grown year over year, and most people can simply just sell their property without this situation.
Maybe they took out a HELOC though, and they owe more.
And maybe they owe more than what is worth. And that's the scenario, you nailed it, where they have a primary mortgage that is a little bit behind, but then they have a HELOC they've spent all the money on, and they've used their home like a bank account, and they've maxed it out. And unfortunately, in that case, their only option when they're pushing them to shove, they can't keep making the mortgage payment or the HELOC payment. And in arrears, all of that legal fees and late payments get tacked on. So that overall balance is greater than what the home is worth. And in that case, that's a short sale situation where a homeowner is selling short of what is owed. And in that case, you could make an offer, but in order for it to actually stick, you have to have the homeowner really heavily involved in that process because they have to make a claim. Now, their benefit is a foreclosure could wreck them for 7 to 10 years, depending on the lender and them trying to buy a property in the future.
Their credit is
a short sale generally is a couple years.
Okay.
So it's looked as like a disdain, but you could work it out.
So how do you get a short sale pass through? Because no one likes to accept an offer and have it go through a sale when there's more owed on it. That balance isn't going to be paid off.
That's correct. And generally, we have not ran into this situation in like almost a decade. We've not ran into a lot of these. There are a few case-by-case examples of where people, are in arrears and are over the boat, so to speak, on what they owe. And in that case, what we have to do is put together a package to present to the lender. Because if the lenders do not sign off on it, they have no real incentive to sell for less. That means ultimately they're taking a discount on the debt that this person promised to pay.
Someone's going to pay for it.
Someone's going to pay for it. And so in that case, the lender would say, well, we ran the cost risk analysis on going to foreclosure and it's going to cost us X with legal fees, what have you. We're going to discount it by this amount, but the lender ultimately has to approve it. Before it ever gets to the foreclosure block in a short sale situation, they've probably contacted an agent, which we get these contacts and calls all the time, where they want us to run like a BPO, a broker price opinion. It's not a full appraisal because often in the case, we're not doing an interior, we're doing an exterior, like a drive-by, run kind of an analysis of the general neighborhood, the comparable sales, to give the lender data points to see if it makes sense to go to foreclosure or if it makes sense to work out either a loan workout, a restructuring, or ultimately a short sale.
A lot of info. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would gather that you would not recommend foreclosure or short sale unless it's someone who wants to take on that risk and has got the guts to see it through.
Exactly. I think it's a really risky situation because often in the case, if they're behind in their mortgage payment, they may be behind in like an IRS tax payment. They may be behind in the HOA fees. And to be clear, you have to clear all of that to get clear title in North Carolina. We're an attorney state. So if someone was trying to do this on, there's a lot of wholesale conversation where people are door knocking, like we're going to provide this solution. That's where it gets really murky. And I would really caution against like go through an attorney, contact a local real estate agent, at least have some data points going into that to make sure you're armed with knowledge if it makes sense for your particular situation.
This is a two-part conversation here on Turnkey on the pros and cons of buying from a previous owner versus buying a new build. Here's part 2 of my interview with Joy Farley from DRB Homes. So you're part of the River District with DRB Homes. There are 4 builders that are a part of this huge project. I would love for you to first dive into what is the River District.
Well, the crazy thing's backstory, I got my real estate license in 2012, and they started talking about the River District in 2016.
It's been a long time.
So the fact that we're almost 10 years removed and it's here, I think people are blown away by, we've been sitting here waiting. We've been watching the development. Maybe they live in the Steel Creek area and are very excited about just the buzz in like a tangible buzz in the air. So to be out there, that it's here, it's ready. All 4 builders are, building their models right now. I went out there last week. I'm like, you can literally tangibly feel it in the air. I've built lots of different neighborhoods over the years, and this just feels so different.
Well, it is different. It's different in
every way. In every way. It's not just like your standard subdivision with a pool and a tennis court. You're talking massive amenities, the nuance of the details and the thought behind every little piece of the puzzle, if you will. And there's just the strategic nature of having, your top luxury builders in Charlotte that just set us apart in a lot of different ways.
So what's all going to be on this development? We see a lot of nature in some of the video that we're showing now, but also, there are going to be apartments, correct?
Yes.
Not only those 4 home builders that you mentioned, but a farm.
There's a 2-acre urban working farm. I'm like, this is all new to me. I said, there's a farm on premise where you have a full-time farmer who his only job is to grow, to sell, to just be a part of the community. There's like a farm-to-table restaurant where people can just have like the farmer's market on a Saturday morning and just the connectivity to not just nature. They're saying that the River District is the soul of the city in the heart of nature. So it's almost like you get out there and you feel like you're so far away because of the walking trails and the biking trails and just your connectivity to just being enveloped in trees. It's beautiful out there. But you're so close to uptown. You're 15 minutes to uptown.
You're close to uptown. You're close to the airport.
5 minutes.
You're close to
45 is a minute away.
the water, right? There's a little bit of everything. What about the preservation aspect of it? Because there's a lot of acreage that Crescent Community is leaving untouched.
Great question. So when you look at the scale of how big 1,400 acres truly is, you're looking at 550 of them being preserved as green space. So they have connected with so many local organizations to say, hey, we don't want to just come in here and clear cut everything, to have the parks and rec, to have the bike trails and all the things that are going to be out there where people are just going to be able to walk out their front door and have just a true connective nature to, being so close to everything. Very exciting.
This is going to take a while for it to be done.
Oh.
Nothing happens overnight. Especially
years.
especially construction. Whatever deadline they give you, push it back months,
just
maybe a couple of
add a few extra months.
So when are the first, homes going to be available for purchase? Are they available for purchase right now?
Yeah, so we have hit the ground running. We took our first VIP appointments last Friday. We released 6 home sites and 4 of them are sold. So You're talking about just pin-up demand. It's pin-up demand. People want to be in this community. They want to be close to the airport. They want to be close to uptown. They don't want to be, maybe in the flight path. That's one of the big questions that's come up. Hey, we're so close to the airport. Is that going to be a problem with, Charlotte Douglas being right there?
Right.
So
is it
no, you're
going to hear some noise, surely, right?
Could you? You have planes everywhere,
right.
But you're not directly in the flight path, so people aren't going to be flying right over you because all of the runways
next to it.
The runways run parallel.
Yeah.
So it's very cool.
And then did I hear something about some headquarters possibly being located there?
That's what I've heard. There's talks of all kinds of things, but when you look at there's commercial space, there's retail space, there's multifamily. So you've got a novel that's going in. I think the first resident should be available probably end of the year, beginning of 2026. You've got all 4 builders, so DRB Homes, Toll Brothers, Saucy Burbank, and David Weekley Homes. And everyone has a very unique selling proposition. If you're looking for a single-family home, you won't be buying a home from us because we'll have mostly townhomes. We will have a nice mixture of single families, but not to start. And then Toll Brothers will be in townhomes as well.
Yeah, they're all very different. They're all very different, which I think is another interesting aspect to this community. And it's not like you have to own a home just to be in the River District because they have the apartments as well. There's talks of, I think, a CMS school at some point. And I know you probably aren't a fan of maybe the comparison because there is no real comparison, I feel like, for a project of this magnitude. But what comes to mind is like Birkdale and Baxter Village, Valentine the Bowl, kind of this like miniature downtown where you wouldn't typically expect it, right?
Well, it's going to feel like a city, like a self-contained kind of, you could live, work, play, literally. Maybe you are part of the, the corporate space and you're like, well, I might never have to leave home. I'm going to walk down the street. They're talking a grocery store and, gas. The West Boulevard extension that just opened has really connected not just you to Uptown and 45, but you also have the premium outlets that are right down the street. So just the flexibility and the convenience factor that you already have basically everything right there. And then I've been telling all of our customers, the longer you're there, the better it gets. So, as things start progressing, all of the amenities, the working farm, what they're calling the Forge building, so that's going to have community space and a working kitchen and, hey, you want to host your baby shower or a birthday party? We'll have space to do all of those things down the road.
That's really cool. And I think there's a lot of excitement behind this project, not just from people in the community or people involved in the project, but also city leaders. The West Boulevard extension.
Mayor Lyles is out there.
Extremely involved. That's a huge project to connect the River District to kind of the rest of Charlotte. In terms of if someone were to be interested in purchasing a home, whether that be for the first time, second time, third time, whatever, there is a difference in the process of going and looking at homes that there's already a previous owner versus buying something that that's new. Being that you're on the end of the newer development, that's kind of your niche.
My lane.
That's your lane. That's your language.
Yes.
What does that look like as compared to someone who goes out and
Purchases the home.
views a bunch of homes, puts in their offer, and hopes it gets accepted? What's the difference there?
Well, I think everybody has different needs, different wants. If you want a more mature community with, canopy trees, maybe you buy in Dilworth, or hey, maybe you want to have city views and that's your vibe. Maybe you buy a condo uptown. Everyone just has a different kind of a buy box. But I think for most people, if you ask them just straight up, if all things were equal, if this home was an existing home, it still fit your price point, schools, all the things that you have a list of. But then if I also gave you this list of, hey, you have a brand new home, it's warranted, it's the latest style and design, it has all the bells and whistles and the technology and all of those things, and your payment wouldn't be very different. What would you choose? If you put that situation next to like a car, you'd say, well, why would I want the 2007 version of the 2025 and my payment's not going to be that different.
Right.
I think in this market, you have everything that's kind of available to buyers. So it's like, okay, well, I could buy an existing home. I could buy a new home. People have options in the market. But I think for that buyer who wants to have kind of a turnkey ready kind of situation where it's truly push to start, everything is already there for you. You're not worrying about your HVAC or your plumbing or your roof leaking and having a huge bill of repairs and cash in the bank to have to worry about those things. And so I think some of it sometimes is just the peace of mind that you have
about all the repairs.
Don't have to worry about those things, and to have, a home that has all the latest and greatest, features. People are right. Oh, I don't want to have to come in and have to do a reno project. People are busy and they could just walk in.
Well, especially with the cost of materials nowadays. I mean, having to do those and looking at the price tag, that can be a big difference maker of like what materials you even choose for a project. If someone were to place an offer, for instance, it is different with placing an offer on a home that's owned already and going through the process of purchasing a home through a developer. Right. Do they put 5% down, or how do they lock into the home? What does that whole process look like?
Well, I feel like there's a lot of misinformation, how our parents bought homes or your grandparents bought homes. Everyone's kind of been told, oh, you have to put 20% down. I have friends who are like, I don't have, $90,000 to put down on something.
Veterans don't have to put anything.
Who has, I'm not saying that not everybody, but if you don't have 20% down, doesn't mean you're excluded from buying a home. There's so many loan products out there, whether it's a conventional loan or an FHA or VA loan that every lender can kind of look into. But I think the thought behind, I've got to have all this cash to buy a home, FHA limits are in the 500s, so you could still buy a home and put 3.5% down and be on your merry way. One of the things that you see in new construction that you don't see, buying an existing home is the due diligence period. So it just doesn't exist in new construction, where you have kind of like that free look period to do your inspections, and you want to have that happen. You want to have that time for an existing home so you can get your inspections and saying, hey, is this something I actually want to
Which you
get into.
Which you still do, even if it's a new home.
100%.
There are things that can happen.
And you would do that, a lot of, there's stages of when you would do an inspection, in new construction. But I think that front end period of the due diligence when you're buying an existing home is kind of like, hey, is there a foundation issue? Do we have structural issues? Do I really want to jump into this or not? So to have the knowledge and the power to be equipped with those kinds of things, to say, I kind of know exactly what I'm getting into. And I think we've made it very easy to say, hey, here's the home sites that are available. Our design team has done an amazing job really hand curating every single home. So it's not, some builders do like a package, hey, this package has these colors and it'll always be this backsplash and these floors and these cabinets. But we've done it very differently, where our design team has come in and has hand done every single home. So people walk in and say, oh my gosh, this has, completely different options than the house down the street, which will help you down the road from a resale perspective. You know,
Well, you want to be able to tell the houses
apart from each other. If this is if it's a similar floor plan, you're like, well, I walk in my house and your neighbor down the street has the same package, and then you have the exact same house. So being able to help people narrow down what home's best for them based on maybe their own design aesthetics, how you like to decorate, or maybe you're trying to do something completely new. But it gives people lots of different options, and I think they're excited about saying, hey, it might be a similar floor plan and layout, but it'll feel different based on the selections that were chosen. And it shortens the time. You know, if you go to the design center and had to pick out all of your selections, it just drags out the timing. And people want to be able
and
to
that can be a lot
sooner.
For people. I mean, when you're looking at everything, even just as an example, everything inside a Home Depot or
overwhelming.
It's overwhelming big time. Yeah. And when you start looking at the cost of everything, and sometimes it's too much information and
less
too many
is more.
things to
Sometimes less
from.
really is more when you say, hey, you have so many things, rolling around in your head in the whole buying process. Where do I live? What do I spend? What do I qualify for? And then you can kind of work those things back because everybody has a budget. I don't care if you're Oprah or otherwise, everyone has a budget.
Everyone always flirts with, should I blow through that budget just a little bit?
Yeah. You're like, well, what's $20,000 more monthly payment over 30 years?
You start doing the math. Yeah.
Could that just be some bill swapping, as adults? We're like, well, I could move this around and move this around, but to get exactly what you want. And it's a big purchase.
Yeah.
You're looking at, homes in the high 4s, low 5s starting. That's where we're kind of at. So when you talk about making the big purchase decision, get what you want. Don't settle on, the big things. But I think regardless of who buys in the River District, everyone's going to have the connectivity to nature. You're always going to have the amenities that are going to be available to you. And then the proximity to, the city.
Do they have how many pools yet?
I think there's just going to be one.
One big one?
It might be broken into like 2 sections from the renderings that I've seen. I think it's still a work in progress. That building's going to be called the Canopy. But having, pickleball courts and tennis courts and just it's going to be a true outdoor experience. I don't think people are going to just, drive into their garage and, sit on their couch all day. It's going to be very active. We're doing a really fun founders program for our first 100 closings. They get an e-bike. I'm like, is there a founding gift for the sales folks, who are making all this happen?
It's really cool. An e-bike.
But yeah, just the sustainability, the eco-friendliness of the whole project, I think it's just very fitting. So to be able to share that with our customers is like an e-bike. I was like, well, do you have a regular bike? They're like, no. Well, you're like, well, you'll love this even more. Less work.
So that is pretty nice. So if people are interested, they can call, and then they do you have a list right now of whoever is 1, 2, and 3 next to get a home. How does that work?
So we have an online sales department. So people call in and set up an appointment. So we are working by appointment only right now. When the models are done, obviously we'll be on site. We've been meeting some of our customers at our Ballencroft community over in Ballantyne because it's the same plan and it's decorated and it's pretty and it's, not under construction.
Right.
That's always fun to walk people through like a framed home and they're like, where am I?
You're like, all right,
well, here, picture your wall is going to be. I'm like, let me paint you a big picture.
You know what is tough? And it always looks
smaller,
and then you get the furniture in there, and all of a sudden the place looks bigger somehow.
Yeah, same when we pour foundations. People call me and say, "Hey, Joy, I think you poured me the wrong house," and you're like, "No, it just looks very different." I guess if you don't build homes every day, I'm like, "No, don't worry about it."
So sorry, you were talking about is there a list right now, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we have what we call our VIPs. So we've been working through that list essentially of people who said, "Hey, hands up, I want to get an appointment before we release it to the general public." I think that goes live this week. So if you've been interested in the River District and you're like, "Hey, how do I get an appointment?" They can definitely call in. You can go on our website and request an appointment time. And just gonna keep it really simple. We've been in back-to-back appointments for the last week, which is great energy for me. I'm like,
and you still look like that.
I know. So sweet. But when you have people who have said, we've been watching this for years and we can't believe that it's finally here and that I got to be, kind of first in line before it kind of goes live to everybody else. But this week it will be available to everyone and anyone.
I think it's really cool. I think the whole project is interesting. 1,400 acres.
I mean, the mass of that. If you can wrap your mind around just
huge.
how
To
big.
reserve that amount
Yes.
of land in a growing city like Charlotte is really...
Because land is scarce and they don't make more of it.
Nope.
And so when you look at just the mass, you drive out there, it literally, like West Boulevard tees directly into the Catawba River. So right there at the West Boulevard extension, you're like, oh, I'm already here.
Mm-hmm.
And then you turn the other way and you could be in South End in, less than 15 minutes. It's very bizarre, but at the same time, you feel like you're like 100 miles away in, a retreat, and you're so close to the city.
Well, Joy, I appreciate you coming on Turnkey. 5 points, by the way. I think you mentioned Turnkey at some point in one of your answers. So
Turnkey, right? I didn't put
getting
this
the
two
name
together.
of the show right in there.
There's to start.
Talking about the River District today, it's been a lot of fun, really informational. I hope that we can have you on again sometime soon. To everyone else out there, thank you so much for watching Turnkey. We'll see you next time. Morgan Francis from Queen City News here. If you enjoyed watching this content, be sure to download and watch our full series of Queen City News Plus originals on our app. You can find Queen City News Plus using your streaming devices, including Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, and Apple TV. Just search the name Queen City News Plus. Your support will help us to continue our series. Thanks for watching.